Drug treatment specialists will tell you there is not one single cure for opiate addiction. Some recovering addicts have great success on the treatment drug Suboxone. Others are taking a different approach called Vivitrol. Investigative reporter Miranda Combs introduces us to two men taking two different routes to recovery.
It wasn't a good day for construction, but the story this construction worker has to tell parallels the storm.
There was a hole inside my soul, so you know, I've done a lot of, I just did a lot of things I wasn't proud of.
It controlled him for years.
I never dreamed I'd be sober. Honestly, I thought I would die, a drug addict.
Robert Pearson ended up at LifeCore Recovery in London, where they specialize in using Vivitrol, a drug treatment medication that isn't a narcotic.
Which I haven't had any cravings or thoughts of using, but I also remember what it was like to walk through that hell.
The hell he's referring to is his detox.
I was evil.
It's rough. I mean, it's hard to describe.
This is Jesse Howard.
It's like the flu, but much worse.
He's going through detox right now.
Like if somebody touches me, I don't even like it. I don't even like my skin.
Why'd you come in as opposed to staying out?
Well, my wife was, I mean, it had escalated. It had gotten worse and worse, you know.
We sat in while Dr. Stephen Lamb, a drug treatment specialist in Lexington, slowly started introducing Suboxone.
There you go.
A different opioid treatment drug to Howard's system.
Keep it under your tongue for at least 6 minutes.
Every 30 minutes, he was evaluated to see if more Suboxone was needed to get him back to feeling okay.
Heart rate, pupil size, bone and joint aches, runny nose. Are you having any trouble with your stomach?
Nope.
After 2 tries, Howard was feeling better. He'll stay on Suboxone and go to therapy sessions for the foreseeable future.
I mean, it's not just like you take the pill and that's it. You know, I have to go to meetings.
This is not his first time on Suboxone, and this isn't the first time we've covered this controversial opioid treatment option. Law enforcement has told us it's the most highly abused drug in southern and eastern Kentucky right now.
There are problems and mistakes, but again, I don't know what else to do. If I did, I'd do it, okay? And yet, I know it works when you do it right.
Dr. Lamb has been prescribing Suboxone since 2003. Along with therapy, he says it works. He admits the patients aren't completely clean since Suboxone is a narcotic.
I can see where people would say, well, you're still taking a drug to beat a drug. You know, I can see that, but this is much more effective than just going on the street buying pain pills.
And if they get well, if they start doing well in their lives, I call that serious.
The drug problem spreads north. Head up to this clinic in northern Kentucky. They are seeing about 16 Vivitrol patients a day.
Is Vivitrol the best medical answer you have right now for addiction?
Yes, it is.
Vivitrol is a once-a-month shot. It's supposed to not allow cravings, and even if a patient tried to get high, they wouldn't feel the effects. The drug has been around for a while, but lately it's getting more traction.
I think one of the reasons why it's not more popular is just that the word's not out.
She says they are seeing 60 to 70% success rates with Vivitrol, but warn a patient has to be serious about recovery. If a patient gets the shot and has opioids in their system, the shot could send them into a more severe withdrawal.
And it's nice to be able to be part of a cure for this, because it really is a cure.
Well, I've offered Vivitrol for a long time to people. And they say it sounds good, but when the rubber hits the road, when the time comes, they say, I'm not sure I can do this. They're frightened of taking it.
See, that would scare me. I'd be afraid that all of it would come out at once and you die.
Pearson is in his 2nd month of using Vivitrol and his 2nd month of putting up siding. This old barn is an animal rescue. The barn is broken and needs fixing, just like Pearson did.
I was looking at a dog over here. It's got a broken leg and, excuse me. And I wanted to take it home with me, you know, because I was that dog with a broken leg, and now I can walk again, so.
Pearson says it's God that's kept him sober.
Already.
But the Vivitrol is comfort that he can't fall back. For Howard, Suboxone is comfort too. Two men taking different routes to stay clean and weather the storm. In regard to Vivitrol, if you are paying out of pocket, it's going to run you about $1,000 for each shot, which is a good bit more than a month's worth of Suboxone. However, insurance does cover Vivitrol, even Kentucky Medicaid. At least that's been the experience of that Florence Medical Group that we interviewed in the story.
How about two guys taking two very different approaches and being completely honest with us about how hard it is?
Yeah, that part was shocking. But the guy that's taking the Vivitrol, he says he was actually on Suboxone for 8 years. It was the worst withdrawal he'd ever been through. But then the guy that was taking the Suboxone, you heard him say, I'm scared of Vivitrol. So very interesting, but we're going to check back in with them in a couple months and see how both of them are doing.
Some new hope, sounds like, you know, for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
New tonight, Moorhead police have issued another warning about a potent batch of heroin. They say today Rowan County first responders responded to several heroin overdoses, and police say one person has died. Moorhead police say Rowan County also saw a surge in heroin overdoses last week.
It is a controversial law that has only been on the books in Kentucky for less than a year. The Good Samaritan law is meant to protect those that witness a drug overdose if they get the victim help. But as WKYT investigative reporter Miranda Combs tells us, following this law may be easier said than done.
When you've lived somewhere most of your life, there are memories everywhere.
He'd always say, Mom, I would never sell this place.
And for Jerry Price, it was a life he wanted for his kids.
They talk about Daddy all the time.
Samantha Price had 34 years of memories with her only child, but the last came on the back of his dad's log truck. Jerry died of a drug overdose.
Even though people do drugs, it doesn't mean they're the worst person in the world. They just need help.
They buried him in early July.
How do you get over losing your child?
But this home is where his spirit stays.
Part of me went with you the day God called you home, and it does, a big part.
Price says her son struggled with drug abuse for years. His toxicology report showed fentanyl in his system that was 11 times the therapeutic level.
I think all the time, what could I have done different?
That's a question with no tangible answer. But there are facts, Price says, that could have saved her son's life.
And he was laying curled up in the back seat.
She says there were people with Price when he overdosed, driving his van.
They just drove him around. They drove him from Berea back into Rockcastle County. They drove him for 3 or 4 hours and him like that. If they would have took the time just to drop him out at the hospital.
There's a piece of legislation that's meant to support just that. The Good Samaritan law was meant to give a pass to people who witness an overdose. They can get help for the victim without facing any punishment for being present.
Would the Good Samaritan law have helped save his life?
It could have, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Rockcastle County Sheriff Mike Peters is investigating Price's death.
It's my understanding from the information that we have at this point that possibly as many as 3 hospitals were passed where he could have been helped.
He thinks most people don't know the law exists, and if they do, they probably wouldn't trust it.
I think a lot of people still think that possibly, you know, hey, it's a trap, they're going to catch me and I'm going to, you know, so I don't want a part of it.
Is it going to work in every situation? Of course not. No law works in every situation. It's another tool. It's another tool we've put out there to try to save lives.
Office of Drug Control Policy Director Van Ingram says the law that took effect last spring hasn't had time to sink in here.
If you look at Cincinnati, who has a similar law and had 123 overdoses in a very short period of time, only 3 of which were fatal.
What's that tell you?
People are calling.
For Price, no one helped. Reports say his wallet was missing when he was found.
As to what mindset they had, why they would not stop somewhere, I can't tell you.
I know he'd done the drugs. I knew that. But they took the choice away from him when they didn't try to get him help.
This Good Samaritan law is a part of the larger heroin bill that was passed last year, Senate Bill 192. Ingram says 24 other states have a similar law to the Good Samaritan law.
This law is so new. It sounds like folks are trying to get the word out about it and let people know. How are they doing that?
Ingram says, as you heard him say, it takes a while for these new laws to sink in for people. One way they're trying to do that, though, is through the needle exchange program to help get the word out. So having information at those locations.
Thousands of people are attending the National Prescription Drug Abuse and Heroin Summit, and Kentucky Congressman Hal Rogers played a key role in organizing it. Today, Miranda Combs talked to him about what he thinks can be done to stop drug abuse in Kentucky and elsewhere.
Our investigations team has been in Atlanta for the past couple of days. We've heard from law enforcement officials, drug treatment specialists, and the medical community. Some have differing opinions on how to treat the drug epidemic. But that's why Congressman Hal Rogers says everyone needs to be here right now.
This epidemic had its epicenter in Kentucky.
He was the only major college president to travel to the summit, a chance for him to learn more about something his university is trying to fight.
These cases so devastate families. And at the University of Kentucky, we believe we're the university for Kentucky, and we have a responsibility.
So we're working on prevention efforts, including...
In each of these rooms, topics were broken down, hashed out, and questioned. A chance for all sides, from law enforcement to the medical community to treatment experts, to say what's working and what isn't.
This is the only place where all of those people come together in the same place and learn from each other.
This gathering of more than 2,000 is Congressman Rogers' brainchild, modeled after Operation Unite's philosophy, that if we take a holistic approach to stopping the epidemic, an end will come soon. Right now, though, numbers continue to rise at startling rates. More babies are being born dependent on drugs than the year before, and the number of heroin deaths has quadrupled in the past 4 years. Rogers says education among everyone here is the start of changing that cycle.
So it's an educational thing for the people that are involved in fighting abuse all around the country from different angles, learning and sharing together.
And it's not just Kentucky's drug epidemic. It's so large, the President of the United States stopped in yesterday, a presence Rogers couldn't have predicted at the first summit 5 years ago.
Yes, it's confirmation that this is a huge problem that the country faces. And it's also a confirmation that this summit is terribly important in fighting that scourge.
Our investigations team has also spent time talking to experts here about the best way to give viewers information about this drug epidemic that's touched so many of the lives in central and eastern Kentucky. Reporting in Atlanta, Miranda Combs, WKYT.
It is a new role for many grandparents in Kentucky, being parents to young children again. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services says there's been a 26% increase in the number of children leaving the state's care and going to live with a relative, many times a grandparent, and many times it's because the parents are struggling with drugs. WKYT's Miranda Combs takes us to Rowan County.
This one was Jacob when he was a baby. And this was his mommy when she was a baby.
You can read a family's history by the pictures on the wall. The good times, mostly.
That's when we went on a cruise last year. He loved it.
But behind this smile is a mom.
I'm 32, and I'm just now getting it together.
That calls this grandmother her share of heartache.
It's a terrible thing. I mean, I used to go hunt for her on the street and try to bring her home. And one day she told me, she said, "Mom, you can't do this. You're going to get killed out here. You don't know what you're doing."
So Doris Whitaker stayed back and raised the rest of her family in her Rowan County home and let her daughter, Kayla, deal with her drug addiction in Lexington alone for years.
I was at a very bad place in my life at that point.
And the night she went in labor, she called me. Of course, I went.
And she met her first grandchild.
He was it all.
But the hospital visit turned into more of a promise.
I had to take him, I had to take care of him.
I felt like he was better off without me if I couldn't get my stuff together.
I didn't know what I was going to do. But the neighbors, everybody found out I was coming home with a baby and had nothing. And by the time I got home with him, I didn't need for anything.
And 7 years went by and hung on the wall.
Did you think about him?
A lot. And I just couldn't get it together. I just couldn't get it together for a long time.
This family is more common than not these days. Rowan County Attorney Cecil Watkins.
I talk to a grandparent every day that's raising their grandkids. Every day.
He says in his county, 90% of the time children are taken from their parents' custody, it's because of drugs. And one of the first calls Child Services makes is to family, grandparents.
They don't have to, and I feel kind of bad for them at different points because, you know, they've already raised one child and then they're having to raise other children.
It's so common in court, his pep talk has a single message. The change in roles make for a long road.
I usually have the conversation with them when it comes to their particular child. Your grandchild's first, and that's priority one.
If he asks questions now, we just try to tell him that she was sick, and it is a sickness.
And now her 7-year-old sees her well.
I'm not where I want to be right now, but I've definitely come a long way from where I was at.
She's been sober almost a year. Her mother still has custody of her son.
He needs his mom. I mean, I'm grandma. Even though, you know, I played the role, I'm still grandma. She's his mother, and she'll be a good one.
Plenty of space for new history to be made.
I'm getting it together slowly but surely, but, you know, I just got to take things one day at a time and not overwhelm myself.
He keeps me young. I mean, you know, when you're up in your 40s running after a little one, they keep you hopping. I mean, I can't say I regretted it. I'm just thankful to have them all back together now.
And in regard to that 26% increase in children being placed with relatives statewide, keep in mind that's just the children that went from the state's custody to a relative's care. It doesn't include the number of children that go straight from a relative to another relative in the family.
And Miranda, we might add, this just isn't grandparents are having to take custody, right?
Right, those state numbers were actually any relative, and when the promo started for this story, I got an email from somebody that said, hey, don't forget about aunts and uncles that are stepping in for this as well, so it takes a family.
Tomorrow morning, the U.S. Attorney General will be in Madison County as part of National Heroin Epidemic Awareness Week. Loretta Lynch will be visiting a county that's already seen more than 30 drug overdose deaths this year. Our Miranda Combs sat down with a victim's mother who's using a chilling resource to try and stop the overdose trend. And a warning, this story does include some emotional moments that may be hard to hear.
This was one of the happiest days of his mother's life. Nikki Strunk finally got to spend the holidays with her son Brendan.
When I found out that year that he was going to come home for Christmas, at the last minute I decided to do, invite my family over, cook dinner, put up a tree.
That wasn't the norm. He was always in and out of jail, started a drug addiction at age 13. They traveled from Kentucky to Ohio and back to Kentucky to try to give her boy a fresh start.
So I feel like that I really had to fight for him from day one.
The fight ended on that happy day, just hours after this picture. Just after she thought this time sobriety was going to work. She noticed the bathroom light had been on all night.
He had actually fallen behind the door, and I wasn't able to get the door all the way open, but I could see him laying there.
What you will hear next is a mother losing her baby boy.
What's your emergency?
I need somebody at my apartment. My son is overdosed.
My story is not any different than your story. This could be your story.
I can't understand what you're saying. Is he breathing? See if he is breathing.
Is he breathing, Mark? He's not breathing. He's not breathing. He's not breathing.
Stay on the line with me. Just stay on the line. Do not hang up.
Brendan, please. Please help me, Jesus, please.
Ma'am.
Yes.
Who else is there with you?
My friend and my sister-in-law.
Okay. Let me speak to them. Hello. Okay. What's going on? Is anyone trying CPR? Is anyone attempting it? I'm not getting any news.
I think it may be on.
Is anyone attempting CPR? Does anyone want to attempt CPR?
No. He's cold. He's stiff.
This call marked the end of her son's addiction and the start of his mother's recovery.
I'm never going to be at peace with losing my child.
These days, Nikki speaks to groups about drug addiction. She plays that 911 call to help those addicted realize they're hurting more than themselves.
And I bring that up when I speak to those in recovery. You know, you're in recovery for addiction, and I'm in recovery because of the grief of what addiction took from me.
She won't move from this apartment. It's the last place she saw her only child.
It's what's my identity now. I'm still a mom, but you know, just not in the normal way that most people are.
But her message is one any mother can honor.
It helps keep him alive, and I'm hoping that it helps someone else to not use for another day.
Nikki will have the opportunity to speak to the U.S. Attorney General during her visit to Central Kentucky tomorrow. She is part of U.S. Attorney Kerry Harvey's newly formed Heroin Education Action Team, which is made up of people who have lost a family member to an overdose.
The damage left behind, just incredible. Just curious why Madison Central High School for her visit.
Not sure, but Madison County has been very proactive. You might recall we did this story on the Scared Straight program where they take middle schoolers from the jail to the coroner's office to a funeral home. So they've always been on the forefront of this, and that's probably a good reason why she's coming there.
Interesting.
U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch spent the day in Richmond and Lexington talking with young people and families about drug use in their communities.
In 2014, Kentucky had the third highest rate of overdose deaths in the country. We were behind only West Virginia and New Hampshire, prompting the Attorney General's visit.
WKYT's Miranda Combs has our top story at 6:30.
But here in Kentucky, you have experienced the ravages of the heroin and opioid epidemic with particular viciousness. It has hit hard here.
The country's top law enforcement official talked to a room full of UK professionals and local leaders at UK's College of Pharmacy to wrap up her day in Central Kentucky. It started early this morning in Madison County, a county hit hard by heroin. She addressed students at Madison Central High School. 600 students filled an auditorium. The lesson: to watch out for your peers.
But we also want to make sure that you've got the knowledge and the information not to go down that road in the first place.
The biggest way for us to fix this is on a small scale problem, or is on a small scale for students to help fellow students along the process.
Now it's time to break down the news.
Our Miranda Combs joins us live now from UK campus with more on the Attorney General's visit. And Miranda, really significant that the Attorney General of the United States chose of all places to come to Kentucky, but we have a big heroin problem in this state.
We do. You know, this is very unusual. Eric Holder, there were no visits from him except a short visit, I think, to the U.S. Attorney's office toward the end of his office at that time. But this is very unusual, Sam, and it's been a long day from her. Let's see, it started at Madison Central High School around 8 o'clock this morning. She talked to hundreds of students there. She then addressed the media, and we had a chance to ask our own questions at a media conference following that. And then she headed and talked to families who have lost people to overdose in a private meeting, and then she came here to UK to the College of Pharmacy to talk to more leaders and more professionals about the opioid epidemic. So it has been a full day. She flew out around 5 o'clock. Following that, there was even a panel discussion here to talk about what her comments were during her time here at UK. So very full day, a lot of interactions going on. And you know, this is something that our investigations team has been covering for a very long time, for a couple of years, from everything from family situations to the actual issues surrounding this. Now, especially hit hard by heroin's resurgence has been Northern Kentucky, Louisville, and Lexington. Why this resurgence? Well, the reformulation of two widely abused prescription pain drugs, OxyContin and Opana, making them harder to crush and snort. Heroin is cheaper and easier to buy. An 80-milligram OxyContin pill runs between $60 to $100 on the street, but you can get heroin for $9 a dose. And that's what brought the Attorney General here today, and why the government is taking aim about drug addiction this week. Now, here are some of the ways the government plans to combat overdose deaths. Many of the recent overdoses
overdoses and deaths in Kentucky and surrounding states have been attributed to synthetic opioids like fentanyl, which we've done a lot of stories on, which mainly comes from China. So those two countries plan to work together to stop the flow. Also a part of this plan is to expand access to treatment. Doctors treating patients with one kind of addiction-fighting drug would be able to treat 275 patients rather than just 100, and that's a discussion that's been in the pipeline for some time. To engage healthcare professionals, more than 540,000 healthcare providers would get training on appropriate opioid prescribing in 2 years. So a lot going on, a lot of discussion started, and moving forward from here, a lot of opportunities for a lot of new changes. We're live at the University of Kentucky. Miranda Combs, WKYT.
There is a problem that is crippling Kentucky's workforce. Potential employees who can't pass a drug test. The number of unemployed working-age people in southern Kentucky is baffling employers. Our investigative reporter, Miranda Combs, takes us now to Somerset.
This time of year, when the colors are changing and the water is still, weekend out-of-town guests are fewer in Pulaski County. And what's left are those who build an economy year-round. But there's something that's making growth nearly impossible these days.
Was it a slap in the face?
It was. I mean, the surprise, I think the shock.
Actually, it starts over here.
Chris Hicks manages UGN Automotive. They make parts that insulate cars from heat, noise, and vibration.
So how many employees are on the floor at any given time?
So on each shift, we run 3 shifts here. There's about 100 people on each shift.
So you can imagine the hit Hicks took when he joined the team in 2013 and decided to do a drug screening for the first time at UGN.
We had 348 team members at that time. Through our screening process, we lost 46 people in one day.
46 people were fired for being on drugs on the job. That's 13% of his staff.
When you lose 46 people on this floor, that's a hit.
It was a significant hit. I mean, for us, we had to balance people that, folks that may work there in that cell would transfer and work into another. We worked 7 days a week for a long period of time trying to make up that.
Since then, things are very different. They have random drug screens for employees and they screen potential employees. And they continue to have fallout. They lose about 10% of their employees a year following drug screens, and 15% of the people trying to get a job here don't pass.
The problems that we have here or experience here are no different than what's happening in our larger community.
So this is a first for you guys?
Yes, it's a first.
And you've been here 22 years?
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time Shirlene Taylor has had to pull population numbers for this reason. It's to try to figure out why unemployment is up, but the jobs are open.
We've never really had a problem with employers finding people.
Right now, in Pulaski County alone, 34% of working-age people are not working. That's up more than 2% from this time last year, and it's up 6% from 2010.
We're kind of at a loss too. It's totally a different world.
Her workforce development area covers 13 counties. Everyone, she says, is having the same problem.
We have a large number of employers here that are looking for employees but having trouble locating or finding the employees, and they're going outside of the areas.
And to show you how bad it is, employers aren't just looking outside the area. Outside employers aren't looking inside the area. The state's attorney general brought it up just last month.
We see in parts of my state where businesses won't locate because they're worried the workforce can't pass a drug test.
As for UGN, Hicks says they are more productive now with the strict standards on drug screenings, but they also have limits to their growth. Those where most of the blame for that falls on a growing drug problem. The fix, though, is harder to find.
How do we help solve the problem? And to be honest with you, I don't know what the answers are. I think it's going to take a lot of us together to figure out what that is and help move us forward.
Shirlene Taylor, who we interviewed with the Area Development District in the story, also blames government assistance as a reason people may be preferring to be unemployed. She says the assistance is paying more than the employers are able to pay the employees.
Sad situation.
Yes.
So she even told you that job fairs are a tough sell.
She said she had one a couple months ago from 10 to 2. One person showed up, and she said that's not even uncommon.
And you're talking about all of these drug tests. That's a lot of money for these folks to have to shell out to pay to have them done.
The companies are, this guy was saying $100 per drug test, because he's even doing the hair follicle test, because he says people can get past the urine test, so he's taking the extra step. But yeah, it's a hit in the budget too.
Huge problem. Miranda, thank you.
Thanks, Miranda.